When my daughter Sarah called me crying at 2 in the morning, saying her boyfriend Marcus had cleaned out her savings account, I felt something inside me snap. But what happened next, what I did to expose this thief in front of his entire family and half the neighborhood, was absolutely priceless. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting creative. My name is Jerome, and I'm a 52-year-old father who spent his entire life working 2 jobs to give my daughter the opportunities I never had. Sarah is my pride and joy, a 24-year-old nursing student who's been saving every penny from her part-time job at the hospital to pay for her final year of school. She's the kind of daughter who still calls me every Sunday, who remembers my birthday with handmade cards, and who's never asked me for a dime since she turned 18, because she knows how hard I work. So when she met Marcus 6 months ago, I was cautiously optimistic. He seemed her happy after her last relationship ended badly, but something, opening doors, saying all the right things. He worked in sales, drove a nice car, and talked charming enough, always complimenting her cooking about his big dreams and bigger pad. Honestly, I was just happy to see checks. Sarah was smitten, and about Marcus never sat right with me. Maybe it was the way his stories never quite added up, or how he always seemed to have an excuse when it came time to pay for dinner. Little things that Sarah brushed off as him being spontaneous or free-spirited. I kept my mouth shut because I'd learned the hard way that criticizing your daughter's boyfriend is the fastest way to push her into his arms. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday night in October. I was dead asleep after pulling a double shift at the warehouse when Sarah's ringtone jolted me awake. The second I heard her voice, shaky and broken, I knew something was terribly wrong. "Dad," she whispered through tears, "I need to tell you something, but I'm so ashamed." My heart started racing. As a father, those are the words that make your blood run cold. I sat up in bed, fully alert now, and told her to take her time. "Marcus took my money," she said, and then the whole story came pouring out. Apparently, 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had convinced her to add him to her savings account. He'd spun some story about wanting to surprise her with a romantic getaway for their 6-month anniversary, and he needed access to contribute his share without her seeing the deposits. Sarah, sweet and trusting as she's always been, thought it was romantic and agreed. The surprise wasn't a getaway. It was finding out that her account, which had contained over $8,000 of her hard-earned money, was completely empty. $8,000. Let me put that in perspective for you. That money represented 2 years of Sarah working weekends and holidays, skipping meals, buying generic groceries, and wearing the same 3 pairs of scrubs until they were threadbare. Every dollar in that account was earned while she was studying for exams, pulling all-nighters, and pushing herself through the hardest program at her college. When she confronted Marcus about it, he'd given her some story about a temporary investment opportunity that would triple her money in a month. He promised he'd put it all back with interest, but he needed her to trust him. When Sarah pressed for details, he got defensive and accused her of not believing in their relationship. That's when I knew this wasn't just theft. This was manipulation at its finest. "Baby girl," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while rage built up inside me like steam in a pressure cooker. "Did you file a police report?" "I can't," she sobbed. "His name is on the account." Technically, he had permission. The bank said it's a civil matter, not criminal. And there it was. Marcus had played this perfectly. He'd manipulated my daughter into giving him legal access to her money, then cleaned her out while hiding behind technicalities. The worst part was seeing how this had crushed Sarah's spirit. She blamed herself, kept saying she should have known better, should have seen the signs. I stayed on the phone with her for 2 hours that night, letting her cry, reassuring her that none of this was her fault, and promising her that everything would be okay. But inside, I was planning something that would make Marcus regret the day he decided to mess with my family. See, here's what Marcus didn't know about me. Yes, I work 2 blue-collar jobs, and yes, I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck. But before I became a father, before I settled down and focused on providing for my family, I had a very different life. I spent 4 years in the military, followed by 6 years working in private security for some very wealthy, very paranoid clients who taught me a thing or two about information gathering and creative problem solving. More importantly, Marcus had no idea that I'd been quietly investigating him from the moment Sarah brought him around. Call it father's intuition or old habits from my security days, but something about his stories never added up. So I'd done my homework. I knew that his successful sales job was actually a series of part-time gigs selling insurance policies to elderly people in nursing homes. I knew that his fancy car was leased and 3 months behind on payments. I knew that he'd been evicted from his last 2 apartments and was currently crashing on his cousin's couch while telling Sarah he lived in a downtown loft. But most importantly, I knew that Marcus had done this before. 2 years ago, he'd dated a young teacher named Ashley who'd filed a civil suit against him for almost the exact same thing. She'd won the judgment, but Marcus had declared bankruptcy and never paid her a dime. As I hung up the phone with Sarah that night, I realized that calling the police or hiring a lawyer wasn't going to get my daughter's money back. Marcus was too slick, too experienced at covering his tracks legally. But sometimes, when the system fails you, you have to get creative with your own brand of justice. The plan that started forming in my mind wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. Marcus had built his entire con game on maintaining different images with different people. To Sarah, he was the successful boyfriend with big dreams. To his family, he was probably spinning some story about his relationship and his finances. To potential victims, he was the charming guy with the nice car and smooth talk. But what would happen if all those different worlds collided at once? What would happen if everyone who knew Marcus found out exactly who he really was, all at the same time, in the most public and humiliating way possible? That's when I remembered that Sarah had mentioned Marcus's family reunion was coming up the following weekend. His entire extended family would be there, including his grandmother, who he was always bragging about impressing. His cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends would all be gathered in one place, and that's when the perfect, absolutely priceless plan started coming together in my mind. But before I tell you exactly how I exposed this thief in front of everyone he cared about, let me set the stage for you. Because what happened at that family reunion wasn't just about getting Sarah's money back. It was about making sure Marcus could never do this to another innocent girl ever again. The first thing I needed was intelligence. Over the next 3 days, I called in some favors from my old security contacts and started building a comprehensive profile of Marcus's entire life. What I discovered was even worse than I'd imagined. This guy wasn't just a small-time con artist. He was running a full-scale operation. I found evidence of at least 4 other women he'd scammed in the past 2 years, all using variations of the same playbook. He'd find young women who were hard-working, independent, and had something to lose. Then he'd love-bomb them, gain their trust, and systematically drain their accounts before disappearing. But Marcus had gotten sloppy. He was using the same social media accounts, the same phone number, and even recycling the same lies with different women. I found Instagram posts where he'd taken 3 different girlfriends to the exact same restaurant, claiming it was their special place. I found Venmo transactions showing him paying rent to his cousin while telling Sarah he owned his apartment. The most damning evidence came from a Facebook group for scam victims that one of his exes had created. Ashley, the teacher I'd found earlier, had been documenting everything. She'd connected with two other women, and together they'd built an entire case file on Marcus's methods. They just didn't know how to use it effectively. That's when I had my second brilliant idea. This wasn't going to be a solo mission. I reached out to Ashley through the Facebook group, introducing myself as Sarah's father. Within an hour, we were on a phone call, and within 2 hours, we had a group chat going with all of Marcus's known victims. These women were hungry for justice, and they'd been waiting for someone with the resources and experience to coordinate a real response. Ashley still had screenshots of every conversation with Marcus. Jennifer, victim number 2, had kept all the fake investment documents he'd shown her. Monica, the most recent victim before Sarah, had actually hired a private investigator who'd uncovered Marcus's real financial situation. Together, we had enough evidence to bury this guy. But we needed the perfect moment and the perfect audience. That's where the family reunion came in. According to Sarah, Marcus had been bragging for weeks about this reunion. It was his grandmother's 80th birthday, and the whole family would be celebrating at a community center in his hometown. Marcus had been telling Sarah how excited he was to introduce her to everyone, how his grandmother was going to love her, how this was going to be the event where he officially became part of the family legacy. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been planning to attend this reunion as well. Not as a guest, obviously, but I'd been coordinating with Ashley and the other victims to make sure we had everything we needed for the perfect ambush. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. We weren't going to sneak around or cause a scene. We were going to present the truth in the most professional, undeniable way possible, right in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to Marcus. I spent the entire week preparing. I created a detailed presentation, complete with bank statements, screenshots, and a timeline of Marcus's activities. I had each victim write it had impacted their lives. I even reached out to the A statement describing exactly what he'd done to them and how private investigator Monica had hired, and convinced him to donate a few hours of his time to help us make this bulletproof. But the real masterstroke came from Ashley. She remembered that Marcus had always talked about his uncle Robert, who was apparently some big shot in the family. A successful businessman who Marcus looked up to and was always trying to impress. Ashley did some digging and found out that Uncle Robert owned a small chain of auto repair shops and had a reputation in the community as a straight shooter who didn't tolerate any nonsense. So Ashley called Uncle Robert directly. She introduced herself as someone who'd had business dealings with Marcus and needed to speak with a family member about some concerns. Robert agreed to meet with her for coffee the day before the reunion. That conversation changed everything. Robert listened to Ashley's story, looked at the evidence, and his face went from confusion to disgust to absolute fury. Turns out Marcus had been telling that he was in a serious relationship with a wonderful his family, that he was doing well financially girl, and that he was finally getting his life together. Robert had even been considering bringing Marcus into the family business. By the end of that coffee, to personally throw Marcus out of the reunion meeting, Robert was ready. But Ashley convinced him that public exposure would be more effective than private confrontation. Marcus needed to face the consequences of his actions in front of everyone, so the whole family would know exactly who they were dealing with. Robert agreed to give us 15 minutes during the reunion to present our case. He'd make sure Marcus couldn't leave, and he'd ensure the whole family was paying attention. Saturday morning arrived, and I felt like I was preparing for the most important mission of my life. I dressed in my best suit, printed out multiple copies of all our evidence, and drove the 2 hours to Marcus's hometown with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Sarah had no idea what was about to happen. As far as she knew, Marcus was taking her to meet his family, and I was spending the weekend working on home repairs. I'd told her I loved her, that everything was going to work out, and that she should trust me to handle the situation. She was still devastated about the money, but she'd agreed to let me take care of things my way. The reunion was being held at the East Side Community Center, a modest building that the family had rented for the day. As I pulled into the parking lot, I could see cars everywhere and hear music and laughter coming from inside. This was clearly a big, happy family gathering, which was going to make what happened next even more impactful. Ashley, Jennifer, and Monica were already there, waiting in Ashley's car as we'd planned. They looked nervous but determined. These women had been carrying the weight of Marcus's betrayal for months or even years, and today walked over to their car and knocked on the window. Ashley rolled it down, and I could see the mix of anticipation was finally their chance to turn the tables, elation and anxiety on all their faces. "Ladies," I said, "are you ready to make this man face the music?" They nodded in unison, and I could see the fire in their eyes. These weren't victims anymore. They were warriors, and Marcus was about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong people. We walked into that community center like we owned the place. The first thing that hit me was how normal everything looked. There were balloons tied to chairs, a banner that said, "Happy 85th birthday, Grandma Rose," and the smell of barbecue drifting from the kitchen. Kids were running around playing tag, while adults stood in clusters, catching up and laughing. It was the kind of wholesome family gathering that made what we were about to do feel almost cruel. Almost. Then I spotted Marcus across the room, and any sympathy I might have felt evaporated instantly. He was standing near the gift table wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, his arm around my daughter's waist like he owned her too. He was animated, gesturing wildly as he told some story to a group of older relatives who were hanging on his every word. Sarah stood beside him with a forced smile, and even from across the room, I could see the sadness in her eyes that she was trying so hard to hide. "That's my baby girl," I thought, putting on a brave face while the man who destroyed her trust and stole her future stands there playing the role of the perfect boyfriend. Uncle Robert appeared at my elbow like he'd materialized out of thin air. He was a big man, probably in his 60s, with calloused hands and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor you'd expect from someone who'd built a business from scratch. "You Jerome?" he asked, extending his hand. "Yes, sir," I replied, shaking it firmly. "I appreciate you giving us this opportunity." "Don't thank me yet," Robert said grimly. "I've been watching that boy work the room for the past hour, and it's making me sick. The way he's got your daughter hanging on his arm like some kind of trophy while he tells everyone about his big business deals and his bright future makes me want to throw him out right now." "Trust me," I said. "What we've got planned is going to be much more effective than just throwing him out." Robert nodded toward a small stage area where a microphone was set up. "Grandma Rose is going to give her thank you speech in about 10 minutes. Right after that, I'll announce that we have some special guests who want to share something important about Marcus. That'll give you your opening." I looked back at Ashley, Jennifer, and Monica, who had positioned themselves strategically around the room. Ashley was near the exit, making sure Marcus couldn't make a run for it. Jennifer was by the gift table with a clear view of the whole room. Monica was stationed near the kitchen, where most of the older relatives were gathered. We had him surrounded, and he didn't even know it. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a voice over the microphone. An elderly woman with silver hair and a bright purple dress was tapping the microphone, trying to get everyone's attention. This had to be Grandma Rose. If I could have everyone gather around, I'd like to say a few words. The room gradually quieted down as people moved closer to the stage. Marcus guided Sarah toward the front, probably wanting to make sure his grandmother got a good look at his successful relationship. I watched him whisper something in Sarah's ear that made her nod and smile weakly. Grandma Rose launched into a heartfelt speech about family, about how grateful she was to see everyone, and how proud she was of all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She talked about the importance of honesty, integrity, and taking care of each other. The irony wasn't lost on me. Chatin, and I'm especially excited, she continued, to meet some of the new additions to our family. Marcus has told me so much about his lovely girlfriend Sarah, and I can't wait to spend more time getting to know her. Sarah blushed and gave a little wave, and I felt my heart break a little more. This sweet old lady was about to find out that her grandson was a predator, and my daughter was about to be humiliated in front of strangers. For a moment, I almost called the whole thing off, but then I remembered the other victims. I remembered the Facebook group Ashley had created, full of women sharing their stories about Marcus's manipulation. I remembered the stack of evidence in my briefcase that proved this wasn't just about Sarah's money. This was about stopping a serial con artist before he destroyed more lives. Grandma Rose finished her speech to applause, and then Uncle Robert stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you, Mama," he said, giving her a hug. "Before we get back to celebrating, we have some visitors here today who wanted to share something important with the family. Jerome, would you and your friends come up here, please?" This was it, the moment of truth. I walked toward the stage, and I could feel the energy in the room shift. Conversations stopped. People turned to look at me with curiosity and confusion. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus's head snap up, his face going from relaxed to concerned in about 2 seconds. "Who is that?" I heard someone whisper. "I don't know, but he looks serious." As I reached for the microphone, I caught sight of Sarah's face. She looked completely bewildered, probably wondering what her father was doing at her boyfriend's family reunion. Marcus had moved slightly in front of her, like he was trying to protect her from whatever was about to happen. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "My name is Jerome, and I'm Sarah's father." A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah's eyes went wide with shock and embarrassment. "I know this is unusual," I continued, "and I apologize for interrupting your celebration. But I'm here because your family member Marcus has stolen $8,000 from my daughter, and I think you all deserve to know exactly who you're dealing with." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone dropped a plate. I heard Grandma Rose say, "Oh my goodness," in a shocked whisper. But Marcus? Marcus went into full performance mode. "This is insane," he shouted, throwing his hands up. "Sarah, what is your father doing here? Why is he saying these crazy things?" He turned to address the room, his voice taking on that smooth, confident tone I'd heard him use so many times before. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry about this disruption. Sarah's father has some mental health issues, and he's been harassing us for weeks with these wild accusations. Sarah, honey, tell them how your father has been acting erratic lately." I had to hand it to him. It was a good strategy. Turn the victim's family member into the unstable one. Make everyone feel sympathy for the poor couple being harassed by the crazy father. If I hadn't been prepared for exactly this response, it might have even worked. But I was prepared. "That's an interesting story, Marcus," I said calmly. "But before we go any further, I think everyone should meet some other people who know you very well." I gestured to Ashley, who started walking toward the stage. Then Jennifer began moving from her position by the gift table. Finally, Monica stepped out from the kitchen area. The look on Marcus's face as he recognized Ashley was absolutely priceless. All the color drained from his cheeks, and for the first time since I'd known him, he was completely speechless. "Everyone," I announced, I'd like you to meet Ashley, Jennifer, and Monica, three other women who've had the pleasure of dating your grandson Marcus over the past 2 years. Now the room erupted. People were talking over each other, asking questions, looking back and forth between Marcus and the three women walking toward the stage. I could see family members putting pieces together, remembering things Marcus had said, realizing that his stories about being single or having just gotten out of a long relationship didn't add up. Sarah looked like she was about to faint. She was staring at the three women with a mixture of confusion and growing horror. "Ladies," I said, as Ashley, Jennifer, and Monica joined me near the microphone, "would you like to tell everyone about your experiences with Marcus?" Ashley stepped forward first. She was a teacher, comfortable speaking in front of groups, and she'd been waiting 2 years for this moment. "Hi, everyone," she said, her voice steady and clear. "2 years ago, Marcus convinced me to give him access to my savings account. He told me he wanted to surprise me with an engagement ring, and he needed to make deposits without me seeing them. Instead, he stole $4,000 from me and disappeared from my life." Jennifer went next. "Same thing happened to me 18 months ago. He took $6,000 and told me it was for an investment that would pay for our wedding. I never saw him or the money again." Monica's story was almost identical. 8 months ago, Marcus cleaned out my checking account. $7,000 that I'd saved to help my sick mother with her medical bills. When I confronted him, he told me I was being paranoid and that I should trust him more if I wanted our relationship to work. The room was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. All eyes were on Marcus, who stood frozen in the middle of his grandmother's birthday party like a deer caught in headlights. But Marcus wasn't done fighting. I had to admire his persistence, even as I despised everything about him. "This is a setup," he yelled, pointing at me. "This crazy man hired these women to come here and lie about me." "Sarah, you know me. You know I would never do anything like this. Tell them." He turned to Sarah, his eyes pleading, his voice taking on that manipulative tone he'd perfected over years of practice. "Baby, you know how much I love you. You know I was going to pay back that money with interest. This is all just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked back and forth between Marcus and the three women. I could see her mind working, processing everything she was hearing, remembering all the little inconsistencies in Marcus's stories that she'd chosen to ignore. "The investment," she whispered. "You said it was a guaranteed return." "It was," Marcus insisted. "It still is." "Sarah, don't let them poison your mind against me. We love each other. We're building a future together." That's when I decided it was time to bring out the big guns. "Marcus," I said, pulling a folder from my briefcase, "would you like to explain to your family how you've been paying rent to your cousin while telling Sarah you owned a downtown loft? Or maybe you'd like to discuss how your car is 3 months behind on payments while you've been telling everyone about your successful sales career." I opened the folder and pulled out bank statements, lease agreements, and employment records. "Or perhaps we should talk about how you've been selling insurance policies to elderly residents in nursing homes while claiming to work in corporate finance." The evidence was overwhelming, and I could see it hitting Marcus like physical blows. Each document I pulled out made him shrink a little more, made his protestations sound more desperate and hollow. But the knockout punch came from an unexpected source. Uncle Robert stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "Marcus," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. 3 months ago, you asked me for a $5,000 loan to help with a business investment. You said you just needed a little capital to get started, and you'd pay me back with interest within 60 days. Marcus's face went completely white. "Yet I gave you that money," Robert continued, "because I believed in you, because I thought you were finally getting your life together." "Where's my money, Marcus?" And that's when Marcus finally broke. The silence that followed Uncle Robert's question was deafening. Marcus stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. No smooth words or clever excuses coming to his rescue this time. I watched as the reality of his situation crashed down on him like a ton of bricks. I can explain," he stammered, but his voice had lost all its usual confidence. "Robert, that money is tied up in the same investment. It's all connected. Sarah's money, your money, it's all going to come back bigger than before." "What investment?" Ashley called out from beside me. "The same investment you told me about 2 years ago? The one that was going to triple my money in 30 days? Or the real estate deal you promised would make me rich?" Jennifer added. Marcus was spinning in circles now, literally turning around as he tried to address different family members who were all staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to pure fury. "You don't understand," he said, his voice getting higher and more desperate. "I never meant for any of this to happen. The investments were real, but the market crashed, and I lost everything. I was trying to make it back for everyone by stealing from more women." Monica stepped forward, her voice filled with righteous anger. "By lying to your own family? By manipulating girls who trusted you with their hearts and their futures?" I could see Sarah in the crowd, and my heart broke for her all over again. She was standing perfectly still, tears streaming down her face, as she watched the man she'd loved reveal himself to be a complete fraud in front of dozens of strangers. Other family members had moved away from Marcus like he had some kind of contagious disease, leaving him isolated in the middle of the room. But I wasn't done yet. The public humiliation was satisfying, but I wanted to make sure Marcus could never do this to another innocent girl. "There's more," I announced, pulling out my phone. "Marcus, would you like to tell everyone about the dating profiles you've been maintaining? The ones where you're still looking for new victims while you're supposedly in a committed relationship with my daughter." I held up my phone, showing screenshots of Marcus's profiles on 3 different dating apps. All of them were active within the past week. All of them showed him as single and successful, and all of them used photos that Sarah had probably taken herself. Marcus's world crumbled completely after that. The family reunion ended with his grandmother crying, Uncle Robert demanding his money back immediately, and Sarah walking out without saying a word to him. Within a week, Marcus had disappeared from town entirely, but not before Uncle Robert made sure every business owner in the community knew exactly who they were dealing with. Sarah got every penny of her money back through a combination of family pressure and legal threats. More importantly, she got her confidence back. She finished nursing school with honors and now works at the Children's Hospital downtown. She still calls me every Sunday, but now our conversations are filled with laughter instead of tears. The 3 other victims? They all recovered their stolen money too, once Marcus's family realized the full scope of his crimes. Ashley used her portion to start a nonprofit that helps other scam victims. They've helped over 200 people in the past year alone. As for me, I learned something valuable that day. Sometimes the best way to protect your family isn't to keep quiet and hope for the best. Sometimes you have to stand up, speak out, and make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of person they're dealing with. Because predators like Marcus count on shame and silence to keep operating. The look on that man's face when his carefully constructed lies fell apart in front of everyone he cared about. That was absolutely priceless. And knowing that he can never hurt another young woman the way he hurt my daughter, That's worth more than all the money in the world. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a father who refuses to let his daughter's pain go unanswered, and a community that comes together to protect the innocent from those who would prey on them.